Hi friends, it's Lisa Mears. Thanks for joining me. In today's video, I'll show you how to create a stunning winter snowflake shaker card featuring the brand new Snowflake Shaker die from Pretty Pink Posh. In addition, I'll show you how to add some shimmer and shine to the snowflake background to create a background full of snowflakes that sparkle. So let's take a look at some of the products I'll be using. This is the Snowflake Shaker die set, and you can use the small star die in the center to die cut the center of the snowflake out to use it as a shaker, but of course you don't have to use this die as a shaker. I'm also going to be using the Cascading Snowflakes Stencil as well as the Snow Days shaker beads. These are so pretty. They have blues and silver and white beads contained within here. So I'm going to start out by die cutting a piece of white cardstock with the large snowflake die, and I love how big this die is. It will actually fit the front of an A2 size card panel perfectly. This is actually an A2 size sheet of white cardstock that I'm cutting it out of, and you can see how it fits perfectly on this piece of cardstock. The die itself is about 4 inches wide, so it is pretty big, and there's lots of stitching on that snowflake, which makes it so pretty. I also want to mention, notice how when I die cut the snowflake out of the cardstock, it puts the identical snowflake shape into that card panel, which you can actually use that for a card if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to focus this video on creating the snowflake shaker. So to make this a shaker, you have to cut the center out. So I'm just lining that die that looks like the star inside of the middle part of that snowflake die cut. I just taped it down and ran that through my die cutting machine to cut the center out. You can also use that die if you wanted to for a star, because you can see that it cuts out a perfect star shape. But we're not going to be using that today, so I'm just going to set that aside. And next I need to take a piece of acetate and I need to close up the middle part where the star is of that snowflake. So just have a piece of snowflake. I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine just to cut that star shape out. And when that comes out of the die cut machine, all I need to do now is just cut along this acetate to cut off these extra pieces that I don't need, because I just need to make sure I have only the star shape. And that's what I'm going to use to cover up the opening on the snowflake. Now you might say, well, why couldn't I have just cut out the star die and use that? And that's because that star die is too small to cover up the opening. Remember, we use that star die to cut out the center, but we need a star that is bigger than the opening in order to cover that opening up completely. So I just turned the snowflake die cut over, so I'm looking at the back side, and this is where I'm going to attach that acetate. So I'm going to take my glue and I'll add glue all along the star, only the star, and then add the acetate right on top to cover up that opening. I'm putting an acrylic block right on top just until that glue dries, and I'm going to stop here and set that aside while I work on my card background. So next I have a piece of A2 size cardstock, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I have 3 different blue color inks. I have the Salvaged Patina, the Peacock Feathers, and the Broken China. Using an ink blending brush, I'm going to add these inks to my white cardstock, starting with the lightest color and then ending with the darkest color. So I am starting with the Salvaged Patina on the top. Then I'm going to add the Peacock Feathers. And since I need to get a little bit of a better blend between the Salvaged Patina and Peacock Feathers, I'll come back in with the Salvaged Patina and I'll blend those together a little bit better. Next, I'm going to add the Broken China to the bottom portion of that card panel. And now I'll need to blend the bottom 2 colors in a little bit better. So I'm just taking the Peacock Feathers and blending that in a little bit better with the Broken China. And you can continue adding more ink to make this as dark as you want and to continue to blend those 3 colors together. I will be adding the Cascading Snowflakes stencil on top of this once I've added the ink to my panel, but I will be using some Distress Spritz to do that. But I'm going to start out by adding some Pixie Spray to the back of the Snowflake stencil, and this spray is just a low-tack adhesive, and it's going to allow the stencil to stick to the cardstock so that the stencil will not move when I continue to work on this background. I am also going to hold this background down with a little bit of mint tape just for an extra layer of security here so that it definitely doesn't move. Okay, so I'm bringing in the Prize Ribbon Distress Spritz. This Distress Spritz will add a beautiful shimmer and shine to your cardstock. Make sure that you shake it up really well, and I am just going to spray it onto my stencil. I want to get a really even coverage, so you can see that I'm spraying as I move my hand to the right, kind of up and to the right, just to make sure that I don't get a whole pile of that spritz in one spot. I'm trying to just cover this stencil in an even layer. So once I've sprayed this down, I'm just going to take a paper towel and wipe up a little bit of that excess and remove the stencil, and you can see all of that beautiful shine on the cardstock. You will need to let that dry completely before adding anything to this background. You can use a heat tool to dry it, or you can just let it sit and dry. And next I'm going to add some double-sided adhesive foam strips to the back of my snowflake. I'm first going around the center part of the snowflake where that star shape is and adding the double-sided adhesive foam around that star. Make sure that the entire star is completely enclosed with that foam. You want to make sure there's no gaps between the foam because you don't want your shaker pieces to fall out of any of the openings. So make sure everything is closed up. Now, in addition to adding foam around that star shape, you will need to add foam around all of these other parts of the snowflake because you want the snowflake to sit flat on your card panel. And if you don't add foam on all of these other parts of the snowflake, it's not going to sit flat on the card. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. And now you can see all of that foam added to the back. I'll be bringing in the Snow Days shaker beads to add to the center of my snowflake. And the shaker beads, that's where I got my color inspiration from on my inked background. By looking at the color beads I was using, I wanted it to match. So I'm going to kind of eyeball where I want these beads to be placed on my card. I wanted my snowflake to be in the center, so I kind of am just eyeballing where I want them to be placed. You can see I'm just using my fingers to try to contain them within the center, and I only need a very little bit because the star part on that snowflake is rather small, so you don't need a whole lot of beads here. So I'm just pouring a little bit here in the center and then just moving all those beads to the center with my fingers, and then I'm going to remove the double-sided adhesive tape from the back of the snowflake, which I actually did that off camera, and then I'm going to position my snowflake right over top of those beads. Then I'm just going to press that down so that it is really snug to that cardstock, and there is the shaker. For the sentiment, I'm using the Sentiment Strips Christmas stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh, and I'm going to stamp out the sentiment Joyful Holiday Wishes, but I'm going to be doing some white embossing on black cardstock. So I have a piece of black cardstock here. I'm going to add some powder to my cardstock so that the embossing powder doesn't stick where there is no ink. I'll ink up the sentiment with my Versamark ink, and then I'll stamp it down. I'll remove that from the Misti, and then I'll sprinkle some superfine white embossing powder over the stamped sentiment, and then I'll use my heat tool to heat set that. There are some coordinating dies that you can die cut these sentiments with, and I'm going to go ahead and die cut the sentiment with the skinny rectangle die that's included in the sentiment strip die set. And then I'll add that sentiment to the top of the snowflake. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add this layer to an A2 size white card base. So I hope you liked my card today. If you like this video, be sure to click that thumbs up button. And if you're interested in any of the products that I've used here today, please check the description box of this video for product links. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.